The criminal organizations south of the border are no longer just drug runners. They are, for all intents and purposes, militarized armies controlling territory, challenging the stability of an entire nation, and really transforming into criminal empires right on the doorstep of the United States. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is, it's an urgent one. We're taking the stack of research you shared with us, and we are diving into this seismic shift that's underway in Mexican organized crime. This is a deep dive into not just what they're doing, but the deep institutional failures that allowed these cartels to morph into these highly sophisticated criminal empires. I mean, they have near military capacity now.
And what's fascinating here, I think, is understanding this shift as a geopolitical crisis. It's not just a law enforcement problem anymore. We're seeing Mexican drug trafficking organizations, the DTOs, and they're operating less like a traditional mafia and more like insurgent groups. They're capable of territorial control and systematic violence, and the scale of their operation right now should really shock everyone listening. Sources confirm that these cartels now effectively control approximately 1/3 of Mexico's national territory. That's as of May 2024.
1/3 of a nation.
Yeah.
That number, it just forces us to redefine what we even mean by organized crime.
Absolutely. This isn't just some border issue. This is a full-blown state capacity crisis. The whole mission of this deep dive is to trace how their power evolved. We really need to analyze how they gained such staggering financial dominance, what their new tactical capabilities are, and, critically, how institutional weakness, especially in the Mexican state's judicial system, created the vacuum they just rushed to fill.
Okay, let's unpack that. Section 1, the profit pivot. The sources make it really clear that the shift away from just smuggling plant-based drugs, like marijuana and cocaine, has made these organizations much richer, much faster, and a lot more complex. This is about smart, diversified crime.
It fundamentally changes the entire economics of organized crime. I mean, drug trafficking is still the primary engine for revenue, but the nature of the drugs has switched. We're seeing the supremacy of synthetic drugs, fentanyl, methamphetamine, over the plant-based stuff. And this is driven by two really simple factors: the incredible profitability of synthetics and the simplicity of their production. You just don't need large fields or, complex seasonal harvests anymore. You just need precursor chemicals in a lab.
And the economics of that shift are just staggering. It lets them bypass so many traditional law enforcement hurdles.
It's an exponential curve of profit. I mean, here's the stunning metric from your sources. An illicit fentanyl pill that sells on U.S. streets for anywhere between, say, $10 and $30. It costs a Mexican cartel only about 10 cents to produce.
10 cents.
10 cents. I mean, that margin it's unattainable in any legal business. It completely dwarfs the profit potential of plant-based drugs. And on top of that, the logistics are just simpler. It's easier to move smaller, more potent packages, and the money that's generated, well, it's often laundered through underground banking systems, shell companies, so it's much harder to trace than, big shipments of bulk cash.
So if production and profit are so centralized and efficient, that brings up a really critical question.
Yeah.
Why does territorial control inside Mexico still matter so much? I mean, why fight for land if they're just selling a synthetic product that can be made anywhere?
That's where the diversification comes in. Control is paramount because it equals market access, both local and global. And it allows them to expand into these really lucrative non-drug crimes. Cartels like the Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco New Generation cartel, CJNG, they're seizing territory to maximize opportunities not just regionally, but globally. They're reaching markets in Europe, in Oceania.
So territorial control acts as a guaranteed supply chain and a guaranteed market for their other criminal businesses.
Yeah, precisely. Control allows them to exploit local populations directly and then diversify into what are basically protection rackets and human exploitation. We see this so vividly in the area of human trafficking. I mean, look at the Gulf Clan, for example. They capitalize directly on the increasing number of irregular migrants crossing that perilous Darien Gap. They impose these mandatory taxes on these vulnerable people, earning an estimated $50 to $80 per migrant, crossing that hellish stretch in 2023. These are sophisticated criminal organizations, and they're monetizing every single layer of chaos and vulnerability the region is experiencing.
Let's pivot to the tactical shift, which is Section 2, the militarization of cartel power. When we talk about militarization, what does that practically mean for, say, a municipality or a local police force is trying to enforce order? It sounds like they're facing small, disciplined armies.
They're facing a sophisticated, well-funded enemy using state-level tactics. That's what it means. Militarization means these groups have adopted tactics you would have previously only seen in full-blown insurgent conflicts. We're talking about the routine use of IEDs, improvised explosive devices. These are devices that are severely injuring and killing local community members and officials. They're also using drone technology to drop explosives onto targets.
And their operational capability looks military, too.
Oh, absolutely. They move around in these customized, heavily armed, reinforced civilian vehicles they call monsters. They're basically low-grade armored personnel carriers. And the sources even point to the fact that they're recruiting foreign mercenaries, particularly from places like Colombia, where there's a ready pool of fighters with high-level training in asymmetric warfare. It just shows they're investing in advanced human capital, not just hardware.
And we have to face the fact that this hardware, this escalation of violence, is overwhelmingly being fed by a constant stream of weapons from the United States. It's a fundamental part of our shared tragedy.
The sources are crystal clear on this. A key component of this cartel firepower is U.S. weapons pouring south across the border. Experts have accurately dubbed this flow an iron river. Estimates suggest somewhere between 200,000 and 500,000 firearms are smuggled from the U.S. into Mexico yearly.
Yearly. 500,000 weapons.
And the standard favorites are still there, AK-47s, AR-15 type rifles, but the escalation is in the heavy firepower.
What's the implication of them using weapons like the M82 anti-material rifle? I mean, for the average person, a rifle is a rifle, but this weapon, it signifies a terrifying capability shift, right?
It's the difference between self-defense and warfighting. The M82 is an anti-material rifle. It's not primarily designed to target individual soldiers. It's designed to punch through engines, through concrete walls, light armor. So when cartels use weapons like this, it signals they're prepared to engage in direct conflict with the state's military and federal law enforcement, not just outgun rival gangs. This militarization is what fuels the chaotic violence that targets civilians, rivals, and ultimately it's what destabilizes the government itself.
And that deep escalation of sustained, organized violence fueled by American weapons and synthetic drugs, it points directly to Section 3, a crisis of state capacity. The Mexican government as an institution just appears unable to contain or stop this collapse. What do the sources say is the greatest structural weakness that allows this massive criminal enterprise to just thrive?
The primary failure is the complete collapse of the rule of law, the judicial vacuum. That's the root problem that grants these criminal enterprises near total immunity. Mexico's judicial branch is so plagued by corruption and mismanagement that the impunity that results is it's genuinely stunning.
Can you elaborate on that? I mean, how severe is that judicial failure? What does the data on conviction rates actually tell us?
The conviction rates for crimes stand at a shockingly low 2 to 3%. Yes. Think about what that practically means. A criminal has a 97% chance of escaping any serious legal consequence, no matter how severe the offense. So if you're a local police officer and you know the chances of your successful arrest leading to a successful conviction are 3%, why would you risk your life? It demoralizes the entire law enforcement structure, and it guarantees the criminal element can operate without fear.
Those numbers, they just speak volumes about the erosion of state legitimacy. And this failure isn't just limited to street-level enforcement, is it?
Oh, absolutely not. This judicial failure goes right to the very top. The sources point out that over a 12-year period, the government managed to arrest 233 high-level members of organized crime. But out of all of them, only 13. Just 13 of those individuals were ever sentenced to prison. The system is just fundamentally broken. It's incapable of holding power accountable.
So instead of focusing on deep judicial restructuring and anti-corruption measures to fix this 3% conviction rate, President AMLO's current security strategy is famously abrazos, no balazos, hugs, not bullets. How is that policy viewed when you're talking about the reality of IEDs and M82 rifles?
Well, it's widely seen by analysts as insufficient because it just fails to address the magnitude of the immediate military-grade threat. The strategy focuses heavily on addressing the social roots of crime poverty initiatives and soft policies like decriminalizing marijuana. And the intention might be good, but, I mean, how do poverty programs halt a convoy of monstros armed with anti-material rifles? The contrast between the policy's goal and the cartel's actual tactical capability it's stark.
So even if decriminalization takes some burden off the judicial system for minor offenses, it doesn't change the war being waged over fentanyl and extortion.
Exactly. The cartels moved on from that years ago. And what's more, the sources highlight another critical flaw. The federal policy often centralizes control. It strips municipalities of security funding, and it delegates more and more power to the military.
That seems counterintuitive. Aren't local officials the ones who actually know The local crime dynamics, the rivalries, the power structures best.
They are the essential source of on-the-ground intelligence, but local governments are tragically the weakest link, and they're prime targets for either co-option or just elimination. The price of local leadership is incredibly high. 65 local officials, including mayors, have been murdered since AMLO took power in 2018. And this federal policy of centralized military control, it removes the best available local intelligence and leaves local leaders exposed without the resources to secure themselves or their communities. It's a systemic institutional failure at every single level of governance.
Okay, so if that level of institutional weakness, that 3% conviction rate, is the fundamental root problem, what concrete, targeted enforcement solutions do the sources suggest could actually work? Beyond these sweeping, broad strategies that have clearly fallen short.
Well, experts argue for a strategic pivot. A pivot toward hard, targeted enforcement, moving away from the massive, almost impossible task of wholesale drug trafficking interdiction. Instead, they suggest focusing on specific crimes that most directly damage civil society and local economies.
Can you give an example of what that kind of strategic focus would look like?
Focus specifically on extortion. Extortion is currently described as wreaking havoc on small and medium business owners. It's crippling legitimate economic activity. By tackling extortion as a specific, high-visibility, manageable problem, distinct from the global drug trade, law enforcement can achieve localized wins, disrupt cartel cash flows that aren't synthetics, and start rebuilding essential trust in local enforcement. It's about picking fights you can actually win to restore legitimacy.
So use your limited resources to attack the criminal activity that directly oppresses citizens, rather than always chasing the global kingpins.
Yeah.
That makes sense. What else works in terms of rebuilding governance?
Strengthening local governance is key, and this is a big but, it has to be paired with strict anti-corruption controls. The data actually suggests that well-tailored security cooperation agreements between local, state, and national authorities can be effective. These are agreements that focus on intelligence sharing, dedicated training, and a really clear division of labor for enforcement tasks.
And did these agreements actually show results?
They did. Before the current administration's approach, back in the 2012-2018 period, these cooperation agreements led to an 8% reduction in homicides in the areas where they were implemented, and a 5% overall fall in homicides nationally. The key takeaway is that when local knowledge is trusted and funded and protected, and coupled with federal resources, the state can push back.
We have to end this analysis by connecting back to the unavoidable U.S. responsibility here. We can't talk about solutions for Mexico without discussing our role in funding and arming these very same cartels.
The sources are unequivocal on this point. The U.S. is identified as the world's largest consumer of illicit drugs, which provides the profit engine, and, critically, its largest supplier of firearms, which provides the firepower. Any lasting solution requires the U.S. to address both the flow of weapons south and the insatiable demand for drugs north. The current Mexican administration has 5 years left to turn this tide, but it requires a clear, deliberate, and sustained effort. It requires focusing on deep judicial reforms, strengthening intelligence capabilities, rather than just relying on the hope that poverty reduction alone will stop the escalation of M82 rifles and IEDs.
The overwhelming takeaway for you today is that this crisis extends so far beyond simple drug trafficking. It's a complete breakdown of governance, defined by a criminal force that has adopted military tactics, is funded by astronomical profits from synthetic drugs and diversified crime like extortion, and is enabled by a staggering failure of the judicial system to hold anyone accountable. I mean, a 97% chance of walking free. The resulting instability poses a clear threat to our shared security and regional integrity.
And if we connect this all back to the concept of legitimacy, we see just how dangerous that vacuum truly is. During the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Sinaloa cartel actively built social support by stepping in where the government could not. They handed out social packages, cash, food, sanitizers to local populations. And they explicitly promised that they, the cartel, will save us, make sure the poverty does not crush us, even as they were simultaneously taking over legitimate local economies like fisheries. And this raises a critical and honestly a chilling question that you have to consider. If criminal organizations are replacing the most basic government functions like welfare and providing essential security, what does it take for a state to reclaim its legitimacy when it can no longer guarantee the most basic necessity of all, safety? That is the ultimate consequence of institutional failure.